Hello and welcome back to the DFS Soccer Show brought to you by VIP-Bet. I'm your host, Kevin DeVries. Joining me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Rob Langevin. What's happening, Rob?
Hey, Kev. Like the guy just said, Kevin's a brilliant man, so he knows what he's talking about. And he says it all in conducive sentences that are easily comprehended by DFS folks like me and you. And Kevin even plays too. So we'll get into the DFS roundup for week whatever week this is, 6.
It was 6, yeah.
We'll call it 6.
Yeah.
We'll call it 6. So
Week 2 for us.
yeah, week 2 for us. Well, week 3, kind of.
Let's not confuse them.
But currently week 6. So
Yeah.
we look forward to doing this every week because we get to recap what people won and when didn't win and who used who and percentages and so it's good when you boil down to it. It's really all about talking about money. So that really can't be a bad thing because we all have money or we all like money. So
Yep, when we first started this, the guy that was speaking to us about bringing us on asked if we liked fantasy sports and money. We sure do, and that's why we're here talking to you about those things. We all like both of those things, and so we're very glad to be talking to you about it. Before we get into the starting team, the team that won, rather, this week, just a bit of injury news. Kevin De Bruyne, very high-owned, pretty disappointing this week, but is going to be out a month, which is a very big news thing. And then the other big news today, Mauricio Pochettino saying that Harry Kane's ankle scan came back much better than expected, in air quotes. Who knows what they were expecting because they never put a timetable on it.
yeah,
But
exactly.
could be good news if he's back soon. But with that little bit of injury news that we heard about today, jumping forward, we're going to jump into the best team this week by Show Me the Chewy. This was his second team, though, so who knows where that first team placed. But obviously, he did very well this week. 185 points is a bit nuts. Rob, what stuck out to you from this team?
Well, since you only roster 8 fellas on your fantasy roster team, and he had 6 that scored and 3 had multiple goal games, I would say Chewy.
That was a good idea.
Hit the money, hit it right on the head here. We'll start at the back because that's where you should start because if you start in the front, then you don't know where you came from. But anyway, so he started with Peter Cech, who's owned at 3.4%. He cost 4,900. He got him 14 points. He paired him with Glenn Johnson, 20.4% ownership, which is completely strange ownership rate for Glenn Johnson, especially
right?
considering what they have fantasy output-wise going.
The worst defense
there.
in the Premier League, yeah.
Absolutely. At 3,600, you gave him 5.25 points, so it's not an awful return on value there. Ownership was bizarrely high for me. I didn't understand the ownership there at all. And then he paired him with the guy. I don't want to pat myself on the good shoulder here, but we're gonna talk about James Milner a lot this week because I called it.
You sure did.
He was owned at 21.5% of leagues, cost 6,600, got you 31.5 points, 2 goals from the PK strip. There's not much more you can ask from a defender. What do you think on his goalie defender setup from his winning standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it went very well. I was almost a little bit surprised that he had a defender do as meh as Glenn Johnson did. Obviously, they don't keep the clean sheet with Solomon Rondon scoring a very late goal. Otherwise, this really could have been a team to envy. Could have, I mean, probably wouldn't have broken 200, but would have been there or thereabouts. So obviously very impressive there. The Milner call, he must listen to this show because you mentioned it. Also, was surprised that Milner had 21%. Our midweek show, we like to focus on values, and that just because somebody's high price doesn't mean they're not a value, and just because somebody's low price doesn't mean they are. But even I was firmly against owning Milner in our last show, which you were not. So all credit to you. I'll pat that shoulder next time I see you. But that was a great call. Apparently he takes penalties for them. Took 2, put them basically in the same spot. It's hard to do better than a defender with 31.5 points. If there was anybody that was disappointing, the opposite of that would be any Hull defender letting in 5 against this Liverpool team. I know it got you in other formats, but as for this defense, very good and could have been a lot better if Stoke had just been able to hold on at the death. But again, yeah, crazy how high that ownership percentage was, considering all the indications coming into this game was that they were probably going to start conceding again.
Yeah, I mean, Stoke letting in only 1 and then scoring themselves was a complete, Wow,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It was a complete disappointment, especially when we get into our highs and lows of the week.
Yeah.
We'll touch on some West Brom players, of course, because a lot of people trusted that West Brom was going to come out of this with it looking very nice and tidy and clean, and they didn't. And
Yep.
they basically got lucky to even tie the game up and go out with 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to his midfielders, he had Lallana. Can't go wrong with Adam Lallana. A goal and 2 assists. 10% ownership, 6,200 for a price tag. Great value. For any Liverpool midfielder this week, minus Roberto Firmino, was probably usable.
Yeah.
I would say usable.
That's the good thing about Firmino, is that like 10
Yeah.
point-ish region is his floor. It's just unfortunate that they score so many goals and he's not one of them.
Yeah. And then when you pair Adam Lallana with Sadio Mane, who got 20.75 points, got a goal by himself, price of 7,500, ownership 32.6, which is really, really high for a Liverpool midfielder, because they have such a variety there that you could basically, give different pieces here and there. But a Liverpool stack was definitely the way to go this week.
And we advised it in the preview show last week.
Absolutely, I thought it was going to be a good idea to pair that with some cheaper options everywhere else, so you can get as many Liverpool options in as you could, and it worked out for him. Because look at his point total; he landed on 185. So yeah, I mean, he also had Joe Allen, he had him in his flex, so he counts as a midfielder. Joe Allen got a goal of his own, which is a complete surprise. Stoke, you're thinking a Stoke guy's going to score, and it's Joe Allen.
Yeah, hoping it was Boney. Like, at least that would make sense. But was it a free kick? I think it may have been.
Yeah, but Joe Allen's ownership 8.2%. His price was minuscule at 4.8%, 4,800. So he obviously scored there because he got you 20.5 points. So looking forward, I don't know if I trust Joe Allen more than anybody else, but at the price tag, you could go wrong because he does do a lot of set piece work there, and is involved in a lot of the build up there for Stoke when they do actually have a build up. He is a decent value there for a DFS play. Yeah. Anything sticking out to you from a midfielder standpoint, ownership wise, point returns?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on our last show that you could do a Liverpool stack, and we mentioned potentially, if you had the funds, maybe do a high-low for both City and Liverpool to get both of them in there together. And if you did that and you got the right combination of guys, you obviously had a great week. I already mentioned De Bruyne was injured and had a pretty disappointing match on the whole, which you and I can talk about. It'd be much more pertinent if he hadn't gotten hurt, but De Bruyne struggles the first 2 weeks when Aguero's there. Aguero gets suspended. De Bruyne tears it up the next 2 weeks. Aguero comes back and it's not there again. That's something that we need to think about going forward. But in this one, double Liverpool, and he gets the 2 right ones you mentioned. Liverpool have loads of midfield options. He could have had Coutinho in there as well, who had a wonderful finish. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's somebody that I've kind of avoided, that midfield on the whole. I love Roberto Firmino. I know you're a big Coutinho guy, at least in the past we have been. We've had that fight many times. But I mean, getting Lallana in there, like you said, just 10% owned. That's how you vault up in the standings. Yeah, not only do you have a guy on high points, but you have him on such low ownership. That's like case in point differential right there. Yeah, and I think that and Allen are what put him all the way up here, because the other guys were all highly owned in somebody's team or another. But to have two guys like that at 10% or under, I think is really what drove him up. Also, I mean, we already talked about Petr Cech, but everybody shied away from that because of Chelsea. So him at 3.4, I mean, only 3 teams kept clean sheets this week. Like everyone thought it would be. Totally. Bournemouth, Burnley, and Arsenal. Sure. Fine. Whatever. This is so frustrating. The goalkeeping thing in DFS can be so frustrating with that 5 points for a win, 5 points for a clean sheet. If you don't get both, you're basically behind the 8 ball, because it seems like every week somebody's going to get it, and it's probably not the person you guessed.
Yeah, and there's not enough save value in right now for any goalie right now. They're not giving you enough return on their value for saves or PK saves, or because you can't bank on PK saves because there's very few and far between. Yeah. But the save point return is not there for goalies. So basically, you're looking for the goalie who has the clean sheet and the win for your DFS team. And
it's been unpredictable. Like the last 3 weeks, it's been wrong.
Yeah, it's been completely
I guess Lloris last week, but...
Yeah. I mean, but, yeah. So,
like the big name guys, they haven't been doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody that's been the most owned or in the top 2 of most owned, like this week, Foster was the second most
Oh,
owned goalie behind Lloris,
yeah.
and he didn't do anything either. So, I mean, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So, getting back to his championship winning cashing team up front, he had a Sergio Aguero. I mean, you can't really go wrong. Owned in 37.8% of leagues, the most expensive player this week at 10.5 or 10,500. I apologize for using 10.5. I'm used to using
Official
prices
points.
from the
Yeah.
official game. Sergio Aguero gave you 28.75 points in return, 2 goals. Basically a Sergio Aguero game. He's basically what he is built for. He's
Yeah.
built for maximum output, maximum goal potential. In any kind of format, he's the guy you captain, the guy you draft first, the guy you want to the most bang for your buck because he is the most expensive player, and he is for a reason because he gives you 2 goals in return.
Yeah.
And
I
then
actually have a question for you, sorry, on Aguero.
Yeah.
Because every week, people, I'm sure, will look at Aguero and be a little bit nervous putting somebody with that high price in there. But I'm going to kind of flip that. Can people afford to not have Aguero considering his goal return when he's healthy?
Not right now. I mean,
Right?
with De Bruyne out, De Bruyne was the second highest priced player this week at 10,100, I believe. But and me and you had a conversation last week in our preview show. I believe that it would be almost impossible to get both of them in a winning lineup, and if that basically would be almost half of your your potential salary towards your building a roster. So I mean, you basically had a flip flop there, and if you picked Aguero, you probably were right. De Bruyne didn't give you an awesome return, but he also didn't give you the 10,100 return either. So from that standpoint, Aguero is definitely the guy. His price is only going to go up from here because he's actually healthy and playing. He's going to get every game. Unfortunately, he's not on this weekend's slate, so we can skip that and look forward to maybe if he's on the next in 2 weeks or 3 weeks because there's an international break after this week slate, and it'd be interesting to see what his price is. I don't know. I don't recall who City plays in 2 weeks or after week was it week 8. So his price could probably be close to 11,000 probably by that time, which would be interesting. But from the standpoint is if you're looking for maximum output and you want 2 goals, which is basically what he's doing so far in every game. If you count all competitions, he's giving you 2 goals or the amount of 2 goals in point return every game. So basically that 10,000 XXX whatever you want it to be is probably worth the return. And if you compare him with who Chewy did this week at Heung-min Son at 5,900, you're basically getting you got 4 goals for 16,000 $16,400.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're looking at. If you want to comparatively compare, that's basically how you have to look at it because if you're putting in for Aguero, you kind of have to steal from Peter to pay your other forward. So at 16,004, you're getting excellent return on value if you're getting 4 goals a game from both your guys. I mean, you're not guaranteed to get that every week because Heung-min Son's been on an unbelievable tear right now. But from a cooperative standpoint, if you look at what Costa did or Lukaku did, if you pair Costa and Lukaku together, they're basically almost similarly priced, or actually they're $400 more than what Aguero and Heung-min Son cost this week.
Yeah, that's crazy. And again, what I mentioned earlier, that the high-low was kind of the way to go this week. And people that doubled up on high-price guys, this kind of wasn't really your week at all. You mentioned Heung-min Son there. Just absolutely incredible. I'll brag about him more in the next bit here. But as for the forwards he picked, I mean, hard to do better than getting whatever that is doubled. People looking at the screen, you'll be able to figure it out. But it's a whole lot of points. And to get that off of, like you said, a cheaper duo than people could have had. And Costa and Lukaku seems like a fully okay
Usable.
thing. Like, why not? You could definitely pull that off, especially the way Everton have been looking. But pretty frustrating there. But for him, I'm pretty sure those are the 2 highest scoring forwards. So to get them both in there, it's pretty impressive.
I think Alexis Sanchez was up there as well.
Yeah, I think he was around 26.
Yeah, 26. I think he had 26.5, something like that.
Yeah.
So moving on, let's get into our own stuff. It's tired of talking about somebody else's stuff. Let's get into our own hates and loves this week. You always want to start with goalkeeper, so jump at it, Kev. Let me hear who's your highlight for the goalkeeper this week.
My highlight was probably Petr Cech. We've already talked about him twice. Going up against the Chelsea side that it looked like the defense was being a little leaky, but they were at least scoring goals. I shouldn't say this without being 100% sure, but I don't think they failed to score yet in a game this season. So you aren't really expecting that clean sheet. But obviously it ends up happening for Arsenal. And never really felt like they were that under pressure, which is kind of reflected by the fact that he only had the 2 saves. Which is not how a lot of people thought this match would go, hence his low ownership. So if you got Cech, obviously you had a great week there, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the higher priced guys this week, and rightfully so, because he's definitely been impressive. Although I'm not sure what day Arsenal play, so he might not be in the main slate.
They're not on the slate. There's only 5 games on the Saturday slate.
Oh, right, and I remember when we talked about earlier in the day. It's not a fun week, but we'll get to it in our preview later this week. But anyway, so not looking forward, but just in this one, I think Petr Cech, it's hard to look elsewhere. Pretty sure he was the highest scoring keeper as well. So very excellent performance from him. He does tend to be higher priced, but if he's going to be keeping clean sheets against Chelsea, considering the kinds of ups and downs we've seen from keepers thus far this season, he's definitely a guy to kind of earmark.
Yeah, I completely agree that, Czech's one of those goalies, and Arsenal especially is one of those teams where they get on a roll and they start clicking as a defense, and they get like 2 or 3 games in a row where they clean sheet everyone and everybody starts taking notice, especially ownership-wise, and in other formats, especially the official game. Yeah. They jump on and bandwagon onto the bundling of goalie key and defenders. My low light from goalkeepers this week, I mentioned him before, Ben Foster from West Brom. 13.1% ownership, like I mentioned before, his second most owned goalie behind Hugo Lloris. He didn't do anything for you. West Brom had a winnable game here against Stoke, and they let him score. Thanks to a late goal from Rondon, they basically scrapped out a point, but I know that doesn't help anybody from a DFS standpoint. But I don't know how West Brom can go from what they did previously in the last week, coming back from beating West Ham and winning 4-2, and then the week before that they had a decent showing, and then they go play Stoke, and this is what happens.
No clean sheets in 3 for West Brom.
It's crazy. They're about as unpredictable. They're starting to get into that realm of clean sheet vagueness, like Crystal Palace is.
Yeah.
Like Crystal Palace is somebody you cannot bank on for like a clean sheet right now.
They'll let in only one, but they're definitely letting in one.
But even one ant ruins a picnic, and especially when we're talking about clean sheets, that one ant sucks. So, Ben Foster, sorry, buddy, you just let everybody down. 13.1% of people who owned you just completely let down, and you owe me something.
I'll lead into midfielders there, or defenders. Sorry, just jumping all over the place. But yeah, for defenders, I wasn't that thrilled with some of my choices. I'm going to go negative. Two usually am I the positive guy. I thought I was going to be sneaky with the news that we weren't going to have Leighton Baines in this one. I went for a sneaky Brian Oviedo, and that hurt me to the tune of -1, which is not really the way you want to go. I already mentioned Everton. They're a team that got clean sheeted by Bournemouth, no less, who randomly are like 3rd or 4th in clean sheets this season. Yeah. Who knows why that's the case. But anyway, very disappointing day from Everton on the whole. And so this one in particular, and Oviedo, definitely hurt me a lot. He ended up being only 4,010% owned. So the idea was right. Everton obviously let me down a whole lot. And the other thing that I didn't really envision was that he'd stay back most of the time, with Coleman being the only one that went forward. And even though they shipped a goal, Coleman did still have a pretty good week. Oviedo, not so much. And he wasn't like a high-profile guy. This is like a low-price, low-owned guy that I was going to try to gamble on. But it was pretty frustrating nonetheless. Who impressed for you here?
Yeah, we talked about him before, James Milner. He basically gave you midfield return. He gave you basically any position on the field return, at 6,600 through the defense, 2 goals, 2 shots on goal, 10 crosses. That's a phenomenal total for a defender, especially, comparing his price. We talked about this on the last show, on the preview show, how his price would, he's the most expensive defender by $600. But basically, if you comparatively, compare him to what a midfielder would give you. Jason Punchin was 6,400, who was I thought a decent play this week.
As did I.
At 6,400, except the Crystal Palace had enough going forward that he would be involved. he only scored 6 points. So at 6,400 and he got you 6 points. On a defender, he was 6,600 and got you 31.5 points. Granted, you can never predict penalty kicks, and he got 2 of them. But that's the meaning of football and DFS. You take gambles where they are, and 21.5% is not a great gamble by a lot of people, but
paid off.
He gave a phenomenal return for what he did.
Yeah, absolutely he did. For midfielders, switching back to positive for me, it's my boy Son Heung-min, which apparently is how I'm supposed to say that now. So apologies for every article and podcast where I've ever inverted that. But I was big on him coming into this week again, especially after he was spared having to play in the EFL Cup midweek. And we saw what he can do again. His pace is exactly what Tottenham needed to bomb forward all the time. And it's not just the 2 goals again, which, by the way, is 4 goals in 3 weeks. Is that he also had 7 crosses. He's now averaging almost 9 a game in the Premier League, which is insane. Because if you think about how often he has to be cutting in to be scoring those goals, and you may hate to hear this, but he should have had a third. He got nutmeg happy, nutmeg 2 people getting into the penalty area and missed a third, but which would have put him through on goal. But the fact that he's cutting in that often and shooting, and he's sending in that many crosses, means that most of the play is channeling through that left side, which you obviously want. He's getting loads of touches on the ball. Not really drawing as many fouls as you'd think he would be with how much he's getting the ball, but it's because he's skipping past everyone to score and sending crosses. So he's been absolutely amazing. And for me, I would keep an eye on the Champions League match this week. I know he isn't as important in this format because Tottenham also missed the main slate, but you do want to keep an eye on him just to see if he can maintain this. And I got to be honest, you aren't going to expect 2 goals a game from him going forward. But if he maintains to have a first-team spot in the Premier League, because there may be some rotation with Champions League and everything like that, but if he keeps getting Premier League starts, his price is going to start going up a lot. But B, you can actually count on these performances. He was an amazing player at Leverkusen, got off to a slow start at Tottenham. He had a plantar fasciitis issue last year. I don't know if you've had it, Rob, or people listening to this, but it hurts to walk. And he had to play half of a season on it. Now that he's finally fit, we're seeing what he can do. His first touch is much better, which was my main criticism of him last year. Point being, the talent has always been there. This is not a crazy thing. Obviously, the result is that you're getting 2 goals in 2 games out of 3 weeks. But this level of performance is not outside of the realm of possibility. So just keep an eye on him going forward. But obviously, Heung-min Son on 34.75, probably the highest earner this week. Probably should have checked that.
I believe he was.
Yeah.
And
you can't not own him. Yeah, 59.
It'd be interesting to see what next time he's on the main slate, what his price is going to be. It's going to be over 6. It'd probably be around 6,500. I probably imagine if he's guaranteed a starting spot, depending on their opponent. So that's an excellent shout for a positive. I mean, you can't go wrong with a guy like was it Son
Heung-min? Yeah, you're supposed to do the last name first, apparently.
First name last name first.
Right.
All right.
Who do you have here?
So I'm going to go with my negative. I'll go with Firmino/Roberto, since we're doing everything in reverse.
Bobby Digital.
Bobby Digital. I'm sorry, but when a team like Liverpool scores 5 goals and you have the talent that Roberto Firmino has, you expect him to be involved in some of the build-up. A lot of the play went the opposite way of him. I know there's 2 goals that came from the penalty stripe, so he has no control over that because he's not in the realm of taking PKs for Liverpool. But be involved. Get involved in some of the secondary passing, the crosses. He basically didn't do anything.
The main thing he did was drag defenders around, but you don't get points for that.
Yeah, he's basically the Rob Gronkowski of Liverpool this week. He was basically the big behemoth of a bluff is what it was. He basically brought one defender with him, and then they were shading an extra defender for him, which I think allowed Lallana the extra space on the opposite side to move freely, and Coutinho actually also to actually have a little extra room. So from that standpoint, it doesn't give you fantasy points, but Roberto Firmino is the big big bluff on the DFS slate.
Yeah, obviously very disappointing on that front. To keep you frustrated, we'll just roll with you. Forward that disappointed was.
There was a couple. I could probably say Romelu Lukaku because he's coming off, expectations. But this is what Romelu Lukaku does, so I can't use something that's expected.
He's the worst.
He is the most, everybody has a friend in their life, and they say, "Oh, I'll give it to you next week. I'll give it to you next week. I'll give it to you." He is the fantasy blimpy from Popeye. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a goal today. Is basically what it is, and he just doesn't give you the returns on a consistent enough value. And Everton showed it against Bournemouth that they are just not a consistent team, especially coming off a week where everybody was jumping on the Everton bandwagon.
Yeah.
That Everton's looking like a top 4 team. This maybe they're starting to get everything figured out. Yeah, we just
I'm
saw
glad.
it.
I'm glad I've never said that.
They just got clean. They just got cleaned by Bournemouth. That's all I'm saying. But I'm going to go with Diego Costa. His price tag and his ownership, he was 8.7% owned. Gave you 3.5% for his price tag. That is just an awful, awful return for a lot of people that were probably bidding against themselves and doing like an anti-Aguero build. It was probably Costa and Lukaku were probably the anti-Aguero forward build for anybody out there, and if they were probably threw Firmino in there because he does qualify at a forward spot. Yeah. But if anybody watched the Chelsea game, I am a Chelsea supporter, so I'll divulge into this. I'm glad for one thing, that this is probably the last time we're going to see Gary Cahill on the pitch for Chelsea.
Oh man, some of those offside traps. Oh my God. That did not go well.
So from that standpoint, I'm probably pretty happy. If anybody's looking for a fantasy sleeper for next week, especially in DFS, how about a Marcus Alonso, because he's going to jump in there, and I think Ivanovic is probably going to slide into the inside and
then switch
Marcus
Dave
Alonso
to right back and play with Marcus Alonso left back.
Cesar Azpilicueta will be on the right side and Marcos Alonso will be on the left. That's basically what Conte wanted to do the whole time, but I think he just had too many veteran toes to step on. Yeah. He's wanted to bring in a middle guy that he liked there for forever. They've been linked to basically every high-profile guy that they could possibly bring in, and every team that they approach says no, and then we're going to up their buyout fee to $75 million. Yeah. So I know I kind of went on a little tangent there, but it's still DFS. We're still talking about fantasy players that are relevant in the cash format. But Diego Costa was a big thumbs down for me this week. Lukaku as well. Rondon, basically saved West Brom's skin, and he saved his ownership this week too by getting that late goal. But there's a lot of big thumbs down because if you didn't have Aguero, you probably didn't cash.
Yeah, and to continue my trend after Youngman Son of unsurprising people I'm going to pick that were obviously impressed. We can go with Aguero and Alexis Sanchez. The two South American strikers obviously both had a very good day. Alexis, I'm not really sure he should be classed as a striker, but he keeps scoring goals. It's going to do the trick for you. A goal and an assist, I believe, for him. So very good performance. Obviously, most of these Arsenal guys were a little under-owned because everybody thought, Chelsea would put up more of a fight. I'm sure you did as well. Didn't happen, so Alexis was obviously a key guy. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, Aguero, he's going to score 2 goals. He's going to score one naturally and one from a penalty. Exactly what he did here. And I saw some tweets of people freaking out in between the time the penalty was called and before Aguero took it because everybody was talking about his poor penalty form. That's for Argentina, and that's in Europe. He has never struggled with penalties in the Premier League. Nope. I don't know if it's some weird mental block in the other places, but if he's taking a penalty in the Premier League, you can pretty much assume it's going in. So calm down on that. He's going to keep taking them. As we were both saying, he seems to be weirdly pretty independent of De Bruyne. So De Bruyne missing doesn't really hurt him at all. If anything, it's just going to push David Silva up. And we've seen what the two of them can do for years. So yeah, Aguero. Not breaking news here. Hey, Aguero's good. That's
Sergio Aguero is a fantasy asset.
He is.
Breaking news. You're hearing it first here, people.
But yeah, so obviously Aguero is a very impressive guy, and I like Alexis. It looks like they're just willing to play him there. It seems like they'd prefer to have Giroud come off the bench. And a disappointing Arsenal guy was Iwobi. Kind of like your point on Firmino. Like, I didn't think Arsenal were going to have a great match, but I did have a couple shares in Iwobi just because he was sending in lots of crosses. Ends up being completely isolated in this game away from everything else. They score 3, could have been more, and he wasn't involved in any of those. I thought it was very strange as well. Basically, because the choice was, is he going to start or not? And as soon as he got the start, I was like, oh, maybe this will be interesting. Not so much. But Alexis and Aguero obviously impressed a lot. And that should do it for us today. Rob, tell the folks where they can get at you.
You can find me on Twitter at Smokey_Loogie, or you can go on Razzball.com. I'm littering the site with all types of fantasy output, especially on soccer site. I cover the official game there, and I'm on this podcast, and we have other podcasts. Kevin will take it because I like to bulk up his resume.
Fair enough. Yeah, we do have a podcast. You can find at EPL Roundtable on Twitter or EPL Roundtable on iTunes. We are the FPL show when you're looking through that feed. Also, I write for theeaglesbeak.com each week, doing a weekly FPL article, which, similar to Rob's, is more about the official game. And you can hear our podcast also at allinsportstalk.com, or you can find radio.co and then look for All In Sports Talk there. So, big thanks to VIP-Bet, who of course are the people that have brought us in to talk to you about all of this stuff. So be sure to check out their website. Have it pulled up right here for you guys. Boom. Look at this. Look at it waiting to load and making it look real awkward. There it is. We're right here under DFS UK Premier League Strategy. So be sure to check us out over there. We're also on YouTube. Here we are, DFS. Look at our pretty faces over here. And VIP-bet.com is the YouTube username. So be sure to check us out at all of those places. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back later this week to preview Match Week 7 for DFS. Can't wait, in the words of Bart Scott.
We're looking forward to hearing from you. Get in touch with us. VIP Bet, your place to win.